Hi guys, it's Drew here, and I'm here to do my weekly review of my top deck choice of the week, which was the Thoth Tarot. I'm in my splendid dressing gown because it's freezing here in Melbourne right now. So I'm gonna get ready to you know, rock it with this deck review. And I've had way too much Pepsi today, so I'm a little bit hyper. So, what a fantastic week it has been with this deck. Every time I pick it up, I am just in love, 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 love with this deck. I think that having this as a choice to work with for the whole year is just amazing because I think that I am considering making it a daily deck, which would mean for me a deck that I actually use all the time. Um, and I think it'd be an interesting deck to do that with. But I'm gonna move on with that and answer some questions, like always, and talk about my experiences with the Thoth deck. So the questions for this week are the same, and I always like to start with my strengths. So the strengths of using the Thoth deck this week was really primarily built around having a deck that was more pippish, and I kind of discovered a lot more decks, both in my collection and online, that had sort of pippish um, suits. And I have a video that I've made in response to Katie Flower's video in regards to like decks that I feel are underrated, and I feel like sometimes decks with pips are underrated for myself because I primarily use decks that have narrative potential or that are scenes, very Rider-Waite-Smith orientated, that have very, you could, very much like scenery and people and lots of symbolism and whatnot. And I love the fact that with pips you do have a chance to actually explore um, different dynamics with color and lines, and it seems like there's a lot of animals in them as well. Now I don't know whether people would still classify it as peeps, but I do. To me they are pippish, and I really found it as a strength for me because I was able to connect with something a little bit different, something that used it forced me to use my imagination a lot more. And since I have been struggling with depression lately, my creative imagination has been a little bit stiff, to be honest with you guys. I'm also grieving at the moment, so it feels like things are processing a little bit slower than normal, a lot harder, and it's a retrograde as well this week. And it was interesting to read with these cards during the retrograde period as it started to shift, and how my intuition sunk much deeper into those pip cards, and really just got immersed in that, because it's a comfort, I guess, for me in this process I'm going through as well, because sometimes I feel like I overwork to understand scenes, and the stories of cards, even though intrinsically I know what I'm reading, I know what I'm feeling when I'm looking at the cards immediately, like from the offset. I just have to go deeper and deeper. So with the pips, it felt like a strength to just be able to look at it and really just grab whatever it was, and sort of like not have to process it so analytically, like just be able to process it subconsciously. I hope that makes a little bit of sense to you guys. And I really enjoyed using this deck as a spread, in a spread. My spread was called, and I'll just show you guys because I love to use my highlighters. I created it called the Shifting the Story spread, and some of the questions, I'll just share some of the questions. Why am I resistant to my story? What shadow surrounds this project presently, and what messages await me in the writing? These are just a few questions, and I'm actually going to make a spread template for this to put on my blog and share with you guys at some point. But for me, it was a really great tool to use in that spread, and it like the spread, like the answers just came so quickly, and I found that as a strength. Like I was able to find the story within the cards very, very quickly. And that's what I mean when I sort of speak about subconsciously. It seems to be just triggering these other worlds, I guess, for me. And that was a really interesting experience. And I used it for my sci fi project. And so just working around that shadows of resistance and procrastination and illusion. It is a very creative deck. It is a very evocative creative deck. So, what were the challenges using this deck? So, I felt like with this deck, I didn't really need to journal that much or journal so deeply, which is a bit different for me because I love to take my decks into an immersion experience with journaling. So, I didn't really feel the need to do that. I just felt the need to look at the cards and sort of what I say, it's a filter through that energy. I kind of funneled the energy of the card into my daily life. It was sort of like taking it on, taking the energy inside of me, taking the imagery inside of me, which was again another experience, but it was a bit of a challenge because I didn't really know what to do for a little while. I'm so used to doing things a particular way. And another thing is that I didn't really feel that guided to use the resources that much. I read a few parts of the books that I mentioned in my video, and I found them very helpful, but for me, it wasn't, this week wasn't about that. It seemed to just be about meeting the deck, and sort of figuring out what I could expect from it. And I really think that I not should, but I will be doing a deck interview spread, which is something that I usually do with my decks, but I haven't done it with this one. So I think that might be a little creative project to work on in the interim between working with some other decks. Just sort of, it just feels so good. Like I don't know, like you know those decks that you just pick up and you just get such an intense joy immersion experience from without even doing anything, just looking at them. Like I know, right? I know. So the next thing that I want to talk about is what I learned during this week while I was using a soft deck. I'm a little bit out of it at the moment. It's very like warm in this room. I'm very sleepy, and I'm like, I have so much I want to say, but what am I going to say? So I was able to really make vast connections with the color patterns, pips, as I mentioned, and the people imagery as well, because the deck is not just about that. It does have humans and human figures and animals and elemental energy and astrological energy. And I didn't really go too deep into the astro, which I thought I might have, and that was interesting. It was really good for me to remove some of the preconceived ideas about what I see as a doorway and what I see as a threshold of change and momentum and learning as well. I've spoken before about how I sometimes do fall into the pattern of relying on like things that have worked before for me and falling into that sort of thing of um, knowing that this works for me and I can repeat that, but wanting to actually step outside of that to learn something different and being a little bit too scared to do that. And I found that this was really great for the creative side of me that wants to throw the guidebooks into the wind. Like it was a really good deck for me to just explore the images. And I did watch a couple of videos as well, like to see what other people's opinions were of the cards that I pulled out, and they were so apt. Like, I loved learning about how the meanings of the cards and my own interpretation, which was so unique to this deck in itself, was reflected in my life, and how much of a strengthening tool it was to use as a way of really appreciating my intuition. Because something that I struggle with is, even though I do believe and know that I have a very strong intuition, I sometimes feel like I don't. Like, I just have those times when I'm pulling something out, I'm feeling something, I'm hearing something, and I get scared. So it was a really great way to just um, step into that and realize where I neglect that part of myself too. And I felt so free to connect with I'm gonna say sci-fi. Like, to me, the Thoth is so occult. Yes, it's so occult, but it also has this like intergalactic vibe to me. It's like not just an other world. It's like an alternative reality, like different realities that I can just step into with the cards, and they just speak. Like, they speak volumes. And so, where I want to take this next, I had to think about this because I quite enjoyed where I was going with it. And I feel like for me, it will be definitely more intuitive draws and spreads. I had so much fun doing that spread that really opened my heart chakra up. It opened my mind up. I got some writing done this week. It really made me face some of my fears, and the galactic or intergalactic perspective or essence that I feel from this deck is definitely one of those things that I fear, because I do have some sort of fears around star seeds and aliens and hybrid creatures and beings, and that's kind of like a childhood suppression coming up, a childhood association, because I'm continuously drawn back to it, and I feel um, like for example, like with these lines, I feel like when the next time I go through this deck and work with this deck like really hardcore, I feel like I want to like step into the deck and go through like all these tiny little what do you call them? I just feel like they're gateways, guys. It sounds so weird, but I feel like I want to just put myself into the card and like separate, if that makes sense. It's a bit kooky. I'm a bit weird, but and walking around inside them and like talk to all these creatures and swing from the ropes and um, experience what it's like to be inside these little egg-shaped things. I don't think I do that enough. I don't think I immerse myself completely in a creative, imaginative fantasy place where I can feel safe. I feel safe going into this. And not safe as in like I would be placating myself or, you know, um, hiding. It just feels like I can go to that deep level of shadow and that deep level of soul with these cards. I actually did pull the Four of Wands. Completion. And I would love to see how these the forms of these creatures, these colors change with my experience with the cards as well. And I know that this is something that is deeply encouraged with every deck, but I don't always feel necessarily guided to create my own associations off the bat. I tend to feel like I want to get to know the artist, get to know their intention, but with this deck, it feels like I could just go without the books. I could literally just make my own meanings from them each and every time. And I want that from a deck. I really want that from a deck. So I'm going to have to come at it from a multitude of perspectives, I think. And that's okay because it's a lifelong deck. Like, to me, that's fine. That is a-okay, guys. So I am enamored with it, as you can probably tell. I just love it. Oh, don't know why I waited for so long. And it did bring up some shit. It totally brought up some shit. I pulled the priestess card. Was no, it's moon card, and I'd never seen like the moon represented in such a dark, like lunatic um, way. Like it was just it dumbfounded me. I don't know why because I honor the dark goddess. Like, but working with the Thoth card, it was like this raw, fucking unhinged, beautiful adventure with the moon, and that's what I needed. Like I've needed that for so long. That shift in perspective, that shift of darkness, that shift of shadow, that rocked my socks, guys. I know I sound like some weird ass person right now, but man, did it just shift shit. It was so dark. And I actually used that card to go on a journey inwards. And I work with Anubis because I wanted to sort of explore that aspect of the card. And I had this really powerful, powerful, powerful moment where I had my meditation. I wrote my meditation up. I work with it, and then I actually did some research on Anubis, and the things that were coming through my subconscious mind, I had no idea. Like I just had no idea about these things about Anubis, and I did some research, and predominantly the heart, the judgment heart. I never knew, and it was coming through my subconscious, and it was a major theme of the connection with the card, and I was blown away. It just anchored me back into that intuitive trust within myself that is lackluster sometimes when I become too ingrained in the physical world and worry too much about perceptions and illusions rather than really going deeper and seeing what's underneath the surface. So that was my long-winded explanation. Definitely going on intergalactic journeys with these cards is definitely primarily my thing, my jam. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be doing my next video. I'll probably film it tonight. I'm not sure when it will go up, but I'll definitely be filming it tonight because I have to decide what deck I want to be working with for the week. I think I have an idea, and I will be sharing with that soon. Sharing that with you guys soon. Dear God. Don't ever have a heater in your room with a closed door while you're wearing a dressing gown because it's like being in a sauna for your brain. Thank you guys for watching. I love you all, and I will speak to you later. Bye.